Greek mythology isn't known for its happy endings. It's filled with plot twists that would break any screenwriter's brain. Stories where heroes fall by doing the very thing they were trying to avoid, and the gods sit back and watch like it's a game they already rigged. Fathers curse sons, sons murder fathers, mothers marry their children without even knowing it. Justice doesn't always win. Good intentions mean nothing. And fate always gets the last word. And if there's one story that captures all of that, one myth where the twist cuts so deep it still echoes through psychology, literature, and tragedy thousands of years later, it's this one. He was brave, intelligent, noble, a king in every sense. He saved a city from a monster. He brought peace. He ruled with wisdom. And none of it mattered. Because before he was even old enough to speak, a prophecy was spoken over him. One so disturbing, his parents tried to erase him from existence. But it didn't work. It never does in these stories. Oedipus didn't fall because he was evil. He fell because the truth waited patiently for him to get comfortable, then tore everything down in a single moment. He solved the riddle of the Sphinx, and then became the answer to a far more devastating one. This is the story of Oedipus, the king who killed his father, married his mother, and never saw it coming. Before he ever had a name, Oedipus was a warning. Before he took his first breath, he had already been condemned. In the high courts of Thebes, where kings prayed with trembling hands, King Laius stood before the oracle of Delphi and asked a question he already feared the answer to. What he received was not comfort, but a prophecy. "You will have a son," she told him, "and that son will kill you. He will marry your wife, and from that union, monsters will be born." There was no room for interpretation, no clever metaphor to untangle, only a cold, harsh fate. Laius returned to Thebes in silence. Jocasta, his queen, carried the child for 9 months. She did not speak of the prophecy. She did not beg for mercy. She simply gave birth to a son and waited for what came next. When the child was born, Laius did not cradle him. He did not hold him to the fire or whisper his name. He called for a servant, and the order was simple. Take the child to the mountains, bind his ankles, pierce them, leave him to die. No cradle, no marker, no mourning, just a baby, bleeding, nameless, alone, left on the slopes of Mount Cithaeron, where the wind howls and the vultures do not wait. Perhaps Laius believed that would be the end of it. That fate could be abandoned in the cold and buried beneath the snow. That the prophecy would fade with the sound of the child's final breath. But the gods do not forget, and fate does not freeze. The child did not die. Rather, the story was only just beginning. The shepherd who found the child wasn't looking for anything in particular. Certainly not a boy half dead and left to die by royal order. But fate has a way of placing things in the hands of those who hesitate. And this man, whether out of pity or fear of divine punishment, couldn't go through with it. He didn't know whose son he held. He didn't ask. He just knew the child wasn't meant to die that way. So the boy was passed along from one man to another until he reached the kingdom of Corinth, far from Thebes, far from the shadow of prophecy. King Polybus and Queen Merope had no children of their own. They ruled with grace and wisdom, but their lineage was silent. When the infant was brought to them, wounded and nameless, they didn't question where he came from. They took him in, clothed him in silk, called him their own. They named him Oedipus, swollen foot, a quiet nod to the injuries he bore but would never understand. And so the boy grew up in Corinth, believing himself the blood of kings. He wore fine robes. He was tutored by the wisest minds in the city. He walked with the confidence of someone who had never had to ask who he was. The people adored him. His parents loved him deeply, perhaps even more so because they feared the truth, and hoped that if they held him tightly enough, it would never find him. But truth doesn't need permission to enter a story. As he grew older, rumors began to follow him. Soft at first, then sharper, more direct. That he didn't resemble the king. That he spoke and thought like someone raised by nobles, but born from something else entirely. Whispers that perhaps he had been adopted, or worse, abandoned. Oedipus tried to ignore them, but once a question like that takes root in the mind, it doesn't stay quiet for long. And so, for the first time in his life, Oedipus went searching. Not for power, not for glory, but for clarity, for certainty. He traveled to the oracle at Delphi, not to ask who he was, but to ask where he came from. What he received instead was something far more terrible. The oracle did not answer the question. She answered the curse. "You will kill your father," she said. "You will marry your mother." Oedipus recoiled as though struck. He didn't ask for this, he didn't even believe it, but it lodged itself in him like a splinter, painful, small, impossible to ignore. In his mind, there was no question what it meant. Polybus and Merope, his parents, must be the ones he was destined to harm. And so, with no goodbyes, no fanfare, and no idea what path he was truly on, Oedipus left Corinth behind. Not in shame, not in defiance, but in fear. Even before he wore a crown, Oedipus carried himself like someone who would. There was something in the way he stood, shoulders straight, back unbowed, eyes sharp but calm, that made people go quiet when he entered a room. He didn't demand attention, he just had it. His features were striking, olive-toned skin, a proud jawline, and eyes so dark they almost seemed bottomless. His hair was thick and black, falling in soft waves just past his ears. In Corinth, where he was raised as royalty, he wore fine tunics and carried the aura of someone born for command. Not because he shouted the loudest, but because he listened. He was thoughtful, unusually so. He read deeply, spoke rarely, and seemed to be always weighing something, even in silence. To those around him, he was everything a future king should be: rational, kind, confident, and unshakably proud. And it was that pride, the belief that all problems had answers, that all puzzles could be solved, that would one day become his undoing. He believed the world was a riddle, and he had been born to solve it. But like all tragic heroes, Oedipus had one fatal flaw. Not arrogance exactly, but certainty. Certainty in his mind, in his choices, in the idea that if he just moved carefully enough, reason would always protect him. What he didn't know, what no one told him, was that reason doesn't stop prophecy, and that fate doesn't care how noble you are. He thought he was climbing toward something, that every step took him closer to truth, to purpose. In reality, every step brought him closer to the very thing he was trying to avoid. The road that led Oedipus away from Corinth was barren, winding, and long. He didn't know where he was going, only where he could not return. Each step felt like distance placed between himself and the prophecy that haunted him. Kill your father, marry your mother, and for a while, that illusion of safety was enough. But there's a place in Greek memory, whispered in tragedy and song, where three paths meet beneath the hills. A crossroads. It was there that fate stopped waiting. On that narrow stretch of road, a chariot approached. Royal, imposing, flanked by armed men. A nobleman inside, older, stern, accustomed to others stepping aside. Oedipus didn't move. Words were exchanged. Sharp ones. The kind that flare fast when two proud men meet with no room to pass. The nobleman struck first, or perhaps his guards did. In some versions, a whip, in others, a spear. But the response was the same. Oedipus fought back, not out of cruelty, but instinct. One by one, he killed them all. When the dust settled, the chariot lay overturned. The guards bled into the dirt, and the nobleman, the one who dared strike a stranger on the road, lay broken among the stones. Oedipus didn't stay long. He wiped the blood from his hands, adjusted his cloak, and walked on. He didn't ask the man's name. He didn't recognize the seal on the chariot. He didn't know that he had just killed King Laius. his biological father. Because fate doesn't announce itself. It simply happens. And by the time you realize where you are, you've already passed the point of no return. Hey everyone, just a quick intermission here. I wanted to say thank you for watching this video. It really means a lot to me. Did you know that over 80% of you who are watching right now aren't subscribed to the channel? If you've enjoyed this content so far, it would be incredible if you could hit that subscribe button. It's a small gesture, but it really helps the channel grow and ensures that you won't miss any more of our fascinating stories we explore together. Also, if you're feeling generous, please give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment, and share with anyone else who may enjoy it. Your support really does make a difference and keeps the content coming. Thanks again, and let's get back to the story. The road carried Oedipus farther from the blood he had spilled and closer to a city drowning in fear. Thebes had not seen peace in weeks. Whispers filled the streets, the gates stood empty, and the sky hung heavy with dread. The king was gone, vanished on some unknown road, and in his place sat something the city could not fight. A creature not born of war, nor famine, nor plague, but of mystery. The Sphinx. She waited just beyond the city walls, perched like a statue carved from nightmare. Her body was that of a lion. Her wings were wide and slow. Her face, still and beautiful and strange, belonged to something that once resembled a woman, but no longer entirely did. She did not rage. She did not scream. But rather, she asked questions. One question, to be exact. And when those who approached could not answer it, she did not spare them. She tore them apart, bone from flesh, and left the remains in the dust beside her throne of stone. One by one, Thebes watched its bravest men die. Warriors, philosophers, kings in waiting. None of them returned. And then came a stranger. Oedipus stood alone before the Sphinx, without an army, without a name that meant anything to the people watching from behind the gates. She spoke to him as she had spoken to all the others. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 in the evening? Oedipus said nothing at first. He looked at her, not in fear, but in thought. And then quietly, he answered, "A man. He crawls as a child, walks upright in his prime, and leans on a cane in old age." For the first time, the Sphinx said nothing. She stared at him, and something behind her eyes flickered, something ancient and cold. Then she turned, stepped away from her stone, and leapt into the gorge below. Just like that, the curse broke. The city rejoiced. The gates were thrown open. The people poured into the streets, not to question the stranger, but to thank him. They crowned him with flowers. They called him king. They brought him to the palace and offered him the widowed queen, Jocasta. And Oedipus, still unaware of who he truly was, of what he had done and what was still to come, accepted. He married her, and the city cheered. Because no one knew that the riddle wasn't over. The monster was gone, yes, but the answer was still walking. For a time, Thebes knew peace again. Under Oedipus, the city flourished. The streets were quiet, the harvests returned, and the people, who had lived too long under silence and fear, found something to believe in again. Their new king was wise, fair, just. He listened more than he spoke, and when he spoke carefully. He didn't bark orders or flaunt power. He ruled the way only someone who never expected a crown could. Jocasta stood beside him, regal, graceful, and calm. She was older than him, yes, but the city didn't question it. They had seen enough curses broken. They were content to believe this was one more. Together, they had children, a new generation of Thebans, blood born from salvation. And for a while, nothing stirred. But the prophecy still loomed in the shadows. Years passed, and then, without warning, Thebes began to rot. The plague came slowly at first, but then came the dead crops, the livestock foaming at the mouth, the children born twisted or not born at all. The The priests burned offerings, but the gods gave no answer. So the people turned to the king who had once defeated the Sphinx, and Oedipus did what he always did. He searched for truth. He sent word to the oracle of Delphi, just as his father had, just as so many cursed men had before him. And the oracle answered. "The land is cursed," she said. "The blood that stains it has not been cleansed. The one who murdered King Laius still walks among you." And with that, the past returned. Oedipus swore he would find the killer, not because he suspected himself, but because he could not imagine failing his people. He stood before the crowds and declared it. He would uncover the truth, no matter what it cost. And the gods listened. Slowly, the truth began to rise. A name here, a detail there. The old king had died on the road, struck down by a stranger at a crossroads. No one had ever found the killer. No one had looked closely. Later, a messenger arrived from Corinth with news. King Polybus was dead. Oedipus, relieved, believed the prophecy broken. The man he thought was his father had died without his hand involved. But then came the second blow. Polybus was never his father. The man had taken him in as an infant, a gift from a shepherd, a child found near Thebes, a child with pierced ankles. Jocasta heard it first. She stood in silence as the pieces fell into place. The child she lost, the prophecy she buried, the man she married. She didn't scream. She simply left the room. Oedipus, still chasing clarity, didn't see the edge he was approaching. He questioned the old shepherd. He confirmed it all. The child given to Corinth, the injuries, the order from Laius, the mountain. And with those words, the riddle was solved. He had killed his father. He had married his mother. And the prophecy he tried to outrun had been walking beside him all along. He returned to his chambers and found Jocasta hanging from her bedsheets. The silence in that room was different. Oedipus didn't call for help. He didn't pray. He took the golden pins from her dress and drove them into his own eyes. Again and again, until darkness was all he had left. There was no ceremony after the fall, no trial, no punishment, no revolt, because no one knew what to do. The man who had saved Thebes was now the one who had cursed it. The hero who had broken the Sphinx's grip was now the killer of its king, the son of its queen, the father of children born from something unspeakable. Oedipus didn't argue with it. He didn't beg for mercy or claim ignorance. He asked for exile. He stood before the same people who once cheered his name, blind now, blood still on his face, and said only that he would leave, that he didn't deserve to remain, that no city could grow with him in it. He walked out of Thebes with no crown, no army, no ceremony, only a staff in his hand and a daughter at his side. Antigone. She was still young, barely more than a child, but she guided him as though she had been born for it. She didn't flinch, she didn't cry. She simply took her father's arm and led him down the road, step by careful step. They crossed hills and rivers, past villages that didn't recognize him, and in time, he faded from the memory of men. He wandered, not like a fallen king, but like something half alive, broken, quiet, and hollow. The world didn't shun him. It simply forgot him. He lived in shadows and ruins, far from palaces and prophets. And there, in the final stretch of his life, Oedipus did something no one expected. He accepted it. He didn't curse the gods. He didn't demand answers. He sat in silence and let the weight of it all settle into his bones. He had solved every riddle but his own. He had been strong and brilliant and kind. He had tried to protect the people he loved. He had ruled with fairness. He had chased truth. And none of it had been enough. Because fate doesn't measure goodness. It only measures distance. And no matter how far you run, it will always be waiting at the end of the road. Greek mythology is filled with villains, tricksters, tyrants, and fools. But Oedipus? He wasn't any of those. He was brave. He was just. He tried to do the right thing, even when it hurt. And that's what makes his story so brutal. Because it wasn't ambition that destroyed him. It wasn't greed or lust or cruelty. It was fate. Fate that was named before he could speak. Fate that moved quietly, step by step, through every decision he thought was his own. Fate that turned every triumph into a breadcrumb on the path toward his ruin. The gods didn't curse Oedipus for being wicked. They cursed him for trying to escape what was written. He solved the riddle of the Sphinx with logic and insight, but no amount of intelligence could help him answer the question that defined his entire life. Who am I, really? He was the child no one wanted, the prince with the wrong name, the king of a city that never should have been his, and the tragic answer to a prophecy he didn't even believe in until it was too late. Fate in Greek myth doesn't come with thunder and lightning. It doesn't always look like a monster or a curse. Sometimes, it looks like you, like everything you've worked for, like the life you thought you earned. And when it finally reveals itself, when the mask slips, there's no going back. This was the story of Oedipus, the king who solved the riddle of the Sphinx, and then became the riddle the world never stopped talking about.